After dedicating 20 years of my life to raising, loving, and supporting my wife's daughter as if she were my own, I was heartbroken and left behind at her wedding when she decided to have her biological father take my place, completely abandoning me in the most painful way possible. I've been married to Sarah for over 20 years. When we first met, she was a single mom raising a lively 5-year-old named Emma. Emma was curious and full of life, with a laugh that lit up every room. I remember seeing her for the first time. She was chasing a paper airplane in the park, clutching Sarah's hand as they walked toward me. In that moment, I felt that they were my future. Sarah was upfront about her past from day one. Emma's biological father, Mark, had always been unreliable, full of empty promises and brief, fleeting appearances. He'd call on birthdays, drop off inexpensive gifts, and then vanish again. Despite that, Emma would light up when Daddy appeared, even as Sarah tried to manage her expectations. When Sarah and I got serious, she made it clear that Emma was her top priority. I accepted that immediately, but what I didn't expect was how deeply I would grow to love her. It wasn't an instant connection. Every "I love you, Dad," and every little drawing with my name misspelled slowly won me over. I was there when she learned to ride her bike after countless falls, and I stayed up with her on sleepless nights when she had a fever, comforting her while Sarah dashed for a thermometer. I helped her memorize a poem for her first school recital, and when she hesitated behind the curtain, she caught my eye in the crowd, silently reassuring me she needed me. Meanwhile, Mark was nothing more than a background figure. He'd make grand promises like, "Next summer, I'll take you to the beach or I'll buy you that bike," but he never followed through. Emma would cry when those promises shattered, and I always tried to pick up the pieces, never wanting to be the reason she lost faith in her father. As Emma grew up, our bond deepened even more. I attended her school meetings, helped her choose her graduation gown, and cheered her on from the bleachers at every game. She even started calling me Dad. Even though I wasn't her biological parent, I knew she meant it. That's why I supported her decision to go to college without hesitation. I paid for most of her tuition, books, and even her small apartment rent. It cost me a lot financially, but I wanted her to have the opportunities one never did. Mark, true to his nature, would occasionally call to say how proud he was but never helped in any practical way. After graduation, I'll never forget the moment when Emma tearfully said, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you. Every sacrifice felt worth it." So when Emma announced her wedding to Andrew, I was overjoyed and envisioned escorting her down the aisle, a moment that would encapsulate everything we'd been through together. I never openly declared it, but I assumed that honor was mine. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, excitement filled the air. Emma discussed every detail, her dress, the flowers, the music, and I offered my help, paying for part of the reception, contributing to her attire, and covering extra expenses. I never expected anything in return other than a simple acknowledgement of my role in her life. Then the invitation arrived. I opened it with a smile, expecting to see my name in that special spot, but instead I found only a formal guest list. My name was missing. Worse, Emma had chosen Mark to walk her down the aisle. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I asked her about it, her response struck me hard. "There's only one biological father, and I've always wanted to give him this moment." That moment crushed me. Years of love, sacrifice, and effort were dismissed in an instant, and it hurt even more because she said it so casually, as if I had never truly mattered. I spent the wedding day in a fitted suit, sitting quietly among the guests, watching Mark escort Emma down the aisle. I waited, hoping someone would acknowledge me, but I was invisible. Something inside me broke that day. The part of me that always gave without expecting anything just shut down. Watching Emma, radiant as any bride should be, left me bitter, not because I didn't want her to be happy, but because I realized I was no longer her priority. After the wedding, Emma and Andrew enjoyed a lavish honeymoon at a seaside resort with breathtaking views and top-notch amenities. A week later, Emma called almost immediately after returning home. Her tone was light, as if nothing had happened. She talked about the beaches and the surprise dinner Andrew had planned. I listened quietly, trying to keep my composure, until she casually said, "Dad, I need a favor. We had some unexpected expenses on our honeymoon and could really use your help." For a moment, I was speechless. She asked as if I always said yes, even though I'd been the one to fix things, provide support, and make endless sacrifices. But this time, something inside me wouldn't let me agree. Whether it was wounded pride or years of feeling overlooked, I replied steadily, "I'm sorry, Emma, but I can't help you this time. There was a long pause. I can almost picture her confusion before she whispered, "Maybe you should ask Mark, he's your real father, isn't he? Maybe he can help." After that, the call ended with a quiet, "I understand." I was left with a hollow feeling inside. Later, Sarah confronted me, calling me heartless and accusing me of abandoning Emma when she needed me most. I explained that it wasn't about money, it was about respect. I had been there for over 20 years, and now it seemed like I was just a backup plan whenever things didn't go her way. But Sarah couldn't understand. To her, blood always came first, even if that blood was full of empty promises. After that conversation, something shifted between us. An invisible wall formed where none had existed before. Emma hasn't reached out to me since, and Sarah later told me that Andrew was furious with me for abandoning Emma in a tough moment, while Mark had completely vanished. I guess Emma is finally beginning to see the truth, but it doesn't erase the sting of that night. Alone in my living room, I replayed every moment I'd shared with Emma, every smile, every time she called me Dad, and I started wondering if that title was ever truly earned or just a convenient label she used when it suited her. I'm not sure I'll ever get over it, but one thing is clear, I'm done giving. Now, 3 months after the wedding, despite my best efforts to distance myself, drama still finds me. Sarah keeps trying to patch things up between Emma and me, looking at me with disappointment and pleading eyes, as if expecting me to return to the man who never said no. But I can't. I changed the moment I declined to help with the honeymoon expenses, and I can't go back to who I once was. Our relationship has essentially ended. She hasn't contacted me, and while that hurt at first, it now feels like a relief. No more hidden requests for money disguised as casual check-ins. Then one evening, over dinner, Sarah mentioned that Emma and Andrew were struggling financially. Andrew had lost his job and they were having trouble paying rent. She asked, "Don't you think we should help our daughter?" I sat down, took a long breath, and said, "I'm not her father anymore. According to Emma, that role belongs to Mark. If she needs help, she should ask him." Sarah stared at me as if I'd just committed something unforgivable. "How can you be so cold?" she asked. "She's always counted on you. You can't just turn your back on her now." I laughed bitterly and replied, "Cold, that's exactly how I felt on her wedding day. I spent 2 decades being there for her, only to feel invisible. If Mark is her father for the big moments, then I guess that's the truth I have to live with. Then he can be her father during the tough times, too." That ended our conversation. Sarah stormed off, plate in hand, heading to the sink. That night, we slept back to back in silence. It hurt to see our bond suffering, but I couldn't keep being the man who gave endlessly without receiving anything in return. Despite everything, Emma managed to reach out, even if it wasn't direct. A week later, I got a short, desperate message from Andrew. "Hey, it's Andrew, Emma's husband. I need to talk to you about something important. Do you have time?" I didn't reply immediately. I left the message there as a reminder of how dramatically things had changed. I read it over and over, knowing exactly what he was asking for: money. Money was always the issue. Eventually, I decided to hear him out. I had nothing to lose. We met at a local cafe. Andrew was already there, nervously tapping his foot and staring at his untouched coffee. I sat down quietly, waiting for him to start. "Thanks for coming," he finally mumbled in a flat tone that felt more obligatory than sincere. "I know things have been rough between you and Emma, but we're really struggling right now, and I was hoping you could help." There it was, the expected request. I kept my face neutral and asked, "What do you need?" Even though I already knew the answer. Andrew groaned, staring at his coffee as if searching for the right words. "Emma and I have been struggling financially since the honeymoon. I recently lost my job, and now we're behind on rent. If we don't pay in 2 weeks, we'll be evicted." I nodded slowly, letting his words sink in before asking the question he probably didn't expect. "Have you talked to Mark?" Andrew looked up, puzzled. "Mark? No, we haven't talked to him." He added, "Emma thought you might be able to help because you've always been there for her." I managed a bitter smile. Ironic, isn't it? When she had to choose, she picked Mark. "So no, Andrew, I won't be helping this time. Maybe it's time for Mark to finally step up." Andrew tried to argue that it wouldn't be fair if they were evicted, that it wasn't just about Emma, but about him too. I raised my hand to stop him. "This conversation is over. I wish you both the best, but I can't keep fixing your problems. I stood up, leaving him with his cold coffee and mounting frustration. When I got home, Sarah was waiting, as if she already knew what had happened. I didn't give her any details, she didn't need them. She could tell I'd refused to help. Since then, Emma and Andrew have stopped asking. Sarah remains unhappy, though she's stopped pushing me to change my mind. But something tells me this isn't over. When a castle falls, there's always more rubble left behind. 6 months have passed since the wedding, and oddly enough, I feel strangely liberated. I've stuck to my decision not to get involved in Emma and Andrew's troubles, even if it means facing Sarah's constant resentment. She never says it outright, but I can see in her eyes that she hasn't forgiven me for what she considers a betrayal. No matter how many times I explain that this isn't about money but about respect, she either doesn't understand or won't accept it. Yet the distance between Emma and me has given me unexpected relief. For the first time in years, I'm free of the burden of always being the one to keep everything together. I've refocused on myself, taken up old hobbies like woodworking, and spent more time with friends, things I neglected for far too long. At first, I felt terrible for taking this space for myself, but now I see it as essential. But the drama hasn't ended. A few weeks ago, Sarah told me that Emma and Andrew had finally been evicted. They couldn't gather enough money to catch up on rent, and their landlord lost patience. Now they're staying with Andrew's mother in a tiny apartment that barely fits 2 people, let alone a married couple. Sarah was furious, exclaiming, "This would have happened if you had helped them," her voice heavy with that familiar blame. I didn't bother responding. No matter what I say, Sarah will always see me as the villain responsible for Emma's problems. What she doesn't know is that deep down, I believe I did the right thing. Emma chose to push me aside, and now she must face the consequences. Sarah also finds it ironic that Mark has been completely absent during all of this. He didn't even answer when Emma asked for help. Given his long history of unreliability, it's not surprising, but it's still strange that despite Emma's efforts to raise him up, he's nowhere to be found when she needs him most. A few days ago, while Sarah was making dinner, she almost made me chuckle as she said, "Emma says Mark promised to help her find a new place to live, but he still hasn't followed through. He claims he's waiting for his finances to stabilize." I raised an eyebrow in amazement. After a lifetime of broken promises, Emma still believes him. I asked, not in anger but out of genuine curiosity, and Sarah sighed with despair. "He's her father," she said simply, as if that explained everything. That exchange has stayed with me for years. I once tried to fill the void Mark left in Emma's life, but now I wonder if it was all in vain. Maybe biology has always meant more to her than actions. Perhaps I wasn't competing with Mark's presence at all, I was just dealing with the fact that he even exists. Then, about a week ago, Emma contacted me, surprisingly, not about money. She sent a message saying she wanted to meet and talk. I hesitated for a long time, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. We met at a park she used to visit when she was younger. Emma was already there, sitting on a bench and nervously fidgeting with her hands. When I approached, she stood and gave me a cautious hug. It didn't feel genuine, but I accepted it out of politeness. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes until she began talking, not about why she had called me, but about how hard it was living with Andrew's mother, the strain it put on her marriage, and how much she missed having her own space. I listened quietly, realizing she had a lot to unload. Eventually, she came to the point. "Dad," she murmured, a word that once meant so much to me but now felt empty. "I know I've disappointed you. I know the wedding hurt you, and I didn't realize how much until it was too late." I let her continue, feeling a mix of disbelief, sadness, and lingering bitterness. Emma took a deep breath before saying, "I just want to say I'm sorry for how things turned out. I never meant to make you feel replaced, but you did." I replied calmly and firmly, "Not just at the wedding, Emma, every time you ignored everything I did for you, every time you chose to see Mark as who he never really was, you made me feel replaced. Honestly, I don't think I was ever really in that role." Emma looked down, clearly startled by my words. Maybe she expected me to simply accept her apology and go back to how things were, but that wasn't an option. Some things, once broken, cannot be fixed. Our conversation ended soon after as we said our goodbyes. Emma mentioned she hoped we could rebuild our connection over time. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want it to, but because I wasn't sure it could happen. Emma didn't just break my heart, she shattered something deeper, my faith in her. I did something that Sarah and Emma will never forgive me for, and I'm not even sure I deserve forgiveness. Over the past year since the wedding, my relationship with Sarah has deteriorated beyond anything I ever imagined. What started as a small emotional distance has grown into an unbridgeable gap. We no longer share the love, bond, or respect we once did. We still live in the same house, but not our lives. There's been no intimacy. At first, I assumed it was just a temporary reaction, but as the months passed, I realized Sarah wasn't simply upset, she was bitter. She blamed me for Emma's pain, and that anger seeped into every part of our marriage. We used to spend our nights talking or watching movies together, now our evenings are silent. Every time I try to reach out, she pulls away, building a wall between us. In the midst of all this loneliness, Sophie, Sarah's best friend, stepped into my life. She had always been a delightful aunt to Emma, showering her with lavish gifts and funny stories. But after the wedding, something changed. Sophie started calling me more frequently, checking in on me. At first, I thought she was trying to help Sarah and me reconcile. Over time, though, I realized it was more than that. Sophie was the only person who truly listened. She told me things no one else would, that I was right, that my feelings were genuine, and that I'd been treated unfairly. She made it clear that Sarah wasn't being kind to me. I began to look forward to our conversations. She didn't see me as the villain in this story. I won't say it was planned, it just happened, like a river finding a new course. One night, after yet another long conversation, we sat together in silence, simply looking at one another. We talked about everything, how invisible I felt in my own home, how cold Sarah had become, and how my life was falling apart. Then Sophie suddenly grabbed my hand and said something that left me speechless. "You deserve to be happy, and they aren't giving you that." I'm not sure what drew me in, her tone, her look, but before I knew it, we were kissing, and she didn't pull away. That night, I didn't go home. I spent hours with Sophie, talking and laughing, finally releasing months of pent-up emotions. For the first time in years, I felt seen, wanted, and most importantly, understood. I know what I'm doing might be wrong, yet I don't regret it. Sophie has become my sanctuary, a person who truly sees me. With her, I found the connection I lost with Sarah. Sarah suspects something, she notices when I get home late or step out to answer messages, but she hasn't confronted me. Sophie feels guilty too, yet neither of us regrets our actions. I know this situation can't last once Sarah finds out, there's no turning back, but for now, I don't feel alone. Final update, 2 years have passed. Looking back, it feels like a storm from a long time ago, yet the wounds still linger. I've rebuilt my life, but I'm not sure I can ever undo the damage. Sarah and Emma cut me out completely, and in a strange way, that freed me once I accepted the truth. Sarah's reaction was even more intense than I expected. Before I could respond, she confronted me. "What is this? I've seen how you've changed. Tell me the truth." I said, "Sophie and I have been seeing each other. She was there for me when no one else was." Sarah's face shifted from disbelief to rage. Then she uttered words that still haunt me. "So all of it, everything we built, meant nothing to you?" I stood there speechless. All I ever did was try to keep our family together, but I failed. "Sarah," I replied, my voice trembling, "while you were busy trying to save Emma, I lost myself, and you never even noticed." She screamed so loudly that it cut deep. "What you've done is unforgivable. How could you destroy our family?" Just then, Emma walked in. She already knew, and her tone was icy. "I thought you were better than this, but you never cared, did you? You just wanted to play the hero and look at what you've done." I answered, "That's not true. I was frightened, you pushed me away. You chose Mark, and when you needed help, I was expected to fix everything. But even when I gave you everything, it was never enough." "Was it enough?" Sarah cried. "That doesn't justify this betrayal. In the end, they told me to leave and never contact them again." It hurt, but I also felt relieved. There was nothing left to salvage. I moved into a small flat. The divorce was a long, grueling process, but the legal battle was nothing compared to the pain of realizing that the life I'd built was over. Throughout it all, Sophie stayed by my side, offering comfort and motivation. She didn't excuse my mistakes, but she never criticized me either. Months later, as I was finally putting my life back together, I received a message from Emma. "Dad, I know I hurt you. I know I failed you, but you will always be my father. I'm sorry." I know things will never be the same, but I will always love you. I didn't reply right away, the wounds were still too raw. Maybe one day I'll find peace, but for now, I'm moving on, no matter what I've left behind. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Here's a continuation and resolution to your story. 2 more years have passed. Life moved on, though the scars remain. I no longer hear from Sarah. Our divorce was finalized, and she cut all ties, refusing even the smallest of conversations. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that she moved to another city, starting fresh. A part of me wonders if she has found happiness. I hope she has. Despite everything, I never wished her misery. Sophie and I tried to build something real. At first, it was easy, 2 lost souls finding comfort in each other. But comfort is not the same as love. Over time, the weight of how we began, of what we had done, settled in. Guilt seeped through the cracks, and doubts grew. Sophie was honest one night as we sat on my balcony, the city lights flickering below. "This isn't what you really want, is it?" she asked softly. I hesitated but then shook my head. "No. I care about you, Sophie, I do. But I think we were both trying to escape something rather than build something real." She gave a sad smile. "I think so too." And just like that, we parted ways. No anger, no regret, just the understanding that we had both been chasing something that could never be. Alone again, I had time to reflect. On my mistakes. On the way I let anger guide my choices. On how, in trying to prove my worth, I ended up losing almost everything. Then, last week, I received another message from Emma. "Dad, can we talk? Not about the past. Just, about now, ****. I stared at the message for a long time. The pain was still there, but the bitterness had dulled. Maybe time had softened my heart. Maybe I was just tired of carrying the weight of resentment. Either way, I responded. "Okay. Where, ****, she picked the same park where we last met. When I arrived, she was already there, looking healthier, more stable than before. There was no nervous fidgeting this time, no hidden agenda. She simply smiled, a small, hesitant smile. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. We sat together, silence stretching but not uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. "Andrew and I are done. It wasn't working. We were holding on to something broken, and it took me a long time to admit that." I nodded, not offering an opinion. She continued, "I have a job now. It's not much, but it's mine. I got a small place, nothing fancy, but it's mine too. For the first time in my life, I'm standing on my own 2 feet." There was something in her voice, pride, determination. It was the first time I had ever heard Emma speak about herself this way. She turned to me. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I miss you, Dad. Not because I need anything. Just because I miss you." I swallowed hard. Years of anger, pain, and betrayal weighed down on me. But at that moment, I saw the little girl I had raised, the one who had once run to me with scraped knees, who had clung to me in the dark. And I knew. I could spend my life holding on to the past, or I could take a step forward. I took a deep breath. "Let's take it one step at a time, okay?" Emma's eyes watered, and she nodded. "Okay." We sat there for a while, talking, not about the past, but about now. About work, about hobbies, about simple things. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you need. As I walked away from the park that day, I felt something lift from my chest. For the first time in a long time, I was ready to move forward. No anger. No resentment. Just the possibility of something new. The past would always be there. But it didn't have to define me anymore. The end.